I don't usually read thriller books until recently, thanks to booktuber Aya Sofia, who hosts a regular reading together event every month. This month's read is The Life We Bury by Allen Eskens. This is the first time I read his book, and to be honest, this is the first time I've ever heard an author with that name. The Life We Bury is a story about Joe Talbert, a regular college guy who came from a dysfunctional family. He had an alcoholic mother who also suffered from mental illness, and he also had a younger brother named Jeremy who was 18 years old and autistic. So not a very happy picture perfect family. And Joe's father has gone long ago. He never knew his father. And the story began when Joe, in college, he had to do an assignment, an English assignment, which requires him to interview an old person. And since Joe didn't have any old age living relative, he decided to visit a senior home, and after a series of minor events, he picked a person, a man, an old guy of course, named Carl Iverson, who came to live in that senior home because of his terminal stage pancreatic cancer. But before Carl lived in that senior home, he was in prison for 30 years. He was accused of rape and murder of a 14-year-old girl named Crystal Hagen. 30 years ago, Crystal Hagen's body was found burned in a burnt barn which belonged to Carl Iverson, and that's why Carl became the main suspect and later became the one who was in prison because of that crime. And later, Joe learned that Carl had been serving in the military, particularly in Vietnam in his young days. So maybe Carl got traumatized by the experience, and that was part of the reason why he did kill and rape Crystal Hagen. Back in the present moment, Joe's neighbor slash love interest, Lila Nash, got interested in this particular assignment. And things got even more interesting when Joe and Lila found out a hint, a small proof that maybe Carl wasn't the culprit after all, that maybe the police had been accusing the wrong guy after all these years, and the real culprit was still out there living and breathing freely without ever knowing how life in prison looks like. What would Lila and Joe do after knowing this fact? You have to read the book to figure it out. The story is told from Joe Talbert's point of view, and what caught my attention since the very beginning is how gloomy the story is, how gloomy Joe's life is, to be more exact. I understand his position because if the shoes were mine, and if I have mother like his, I won't be the happiest person on earth. And if I have to name a character that I hate the most from this book, it is his goddamn mother. And I'm going to read a brief description of his mother told by Joe himself in this book that portrays perfectly how bad this character is. I never met my father and had no idea if he still stained the earth. I knew his name though. My mom came up with the brilliant idea of naming me after him in the hope that it might guilt Joe Talbert Sr. into staying around a while, maybe marrying her and supporting her and little Joey Jr. It didn't work out. Mom tried the same thing when my younger brother Jeremy was born, to the same end. I grew up having to explain that my mother's name was Kathy Nelson, my name was Joe Talbert, and my brother's name was Jeremy Naylor. I hate her character so much that while reading this, I hope that something bad, something terrible will happen to her. I won't spoil the ending, but I have to say that in the end, after all the major events in this book has happened, Joe Talbot has become a very different person in the end. In a good way, of course, so it's a good ending. And I like how the author successfully puts me as a reader inside Joe's head so that I can sympathize with his feelings. In the first and second act of this book, there is no real action because all that Joe, and sometimes accompanied by Lila, did was investigating Carl's old case files, and sometimes Joe had to go back to his hometown to take care of his brother when their mother decided to go crazy once again and neglected him. Sometimes there are also some stories about Carl's past in the Vietnam War, but there was no real action, but that doesn't make the story boring at all. The story was never boring to me. And just like how a good story should go, the stakes are raised in the third act, where finally Joe decided to take real action, to take crazy actions to get Carl exonerated. At this point, I got more and more hooked to the story, and that's why I was able to finish this book in 4 days, 4 working days. I looked it up online, and most of the reviews and people's opinions about this book are the positive ones, and this is one of them. As debuts go, Allen Eskens couldn't have asked much more of his 2014 success, The Life We Bury. His tale of Joe Talbot, a junior at the University of Minnesota, who's given a biography assignment that leads to the unraveling of a 30-year-old murder, launched a career that has seen Eskens on bestseller lists, receiving awards, and translated into 21 languages. I totally understand why this book has become a big success for the author. It's a very good book, it's a very compelling story, I love it, and I think whether thriller books are your thing or not, you have to read this one. I highly recommend this one. There's a sequel of this book, and there are 3 more titles written by the same author in the same universe. So that's all for today's video. Thanks for watching, and please like this video if you like this kind of content. Don't forget to click subscribe and turn on your notifications so that you'll get notified whenever I release new videos. See you in my next videos. Bye bye.